All right, we're live now. So, hello, everybody. Joanna here. Welcome to Why Read, episode 21. And I'm expecting this to be a very fun episode because I not only have the wonderful Jessie May here, but I also have the wonderful fun fantasy books Isa here too. So this is going to promise to be a very exciting, energetic, wonderful discussion. And so before we get into talking about your individual channels, I think I'm going to do this right this time because I always screw this up. We're going to start with the why read question. And so this why read question is it depends. I mean, you can approach it however you want. Generally, I frame it in a sense of like, what right now in your busy lives, like with everything that's competing for your attention, whether it's children, whether it's the next entertainment thing, something on Netflix or a game, what makes you want to pick up a book right now in your life versus everything else that's pulling at your attention? What's driving you towards that book? So we'll start off here with Jessie. So, Jessie,
Wow.
I know
What
it's a
a
big question.
deep a big
Yeah.
question. Oh my gosh. Well, ever since I was young, I always be with us with your mom. I read. Oh my gosh. I always loved fantasy, particularly because I loved escaping into new worlds. And I just love exploring someone's imagination and seeing how different a world can be from our own. And so that for me is why I love particularly fantasy, but I read a wide range of genres. So I think for me, I love reading because I get to one, make great connections with a fantastic community through BookTube. So I
Mm.
think that that's driving a lot of it. And then two, I've just always loved escaping into a new world or experiencing life through someone else's eyes. I think that that's why I read right now.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful reason. I think that's the beautiful thing about having a book community is that you not only get to explore these different worlds in a book and get to, I don't know, just engage with your own imagination at the same time as engaging with what an author is providing, but then to get to share it with other people in the
Yeah,
community. It just adds more excitement, and then you get to have a dialogue about it. And I don't know, it's just so fun. It just adds
Yeah,
to the experience.
totally.
Absolutely.
absolutely.
And
Beautiful answer.
the community is amazing. I mean, I knew before being a creator that the community was amazing because I saw the comments and it was so amazing already. But since I started with the channel, you get like all those comments are then for you and are just l- feedbacking on your love for reading. And it's just so amazing and everything. It's, everyone is so nice and you see the love of reading. And it is also, I mean, I don't have that as an answer, but thinking about that, it's also definitely one of the, drives keeping me reading.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's something that surprised me about starting a channel and getting involved in the community is that I think all of us who came here already loved reading, but then it's like, "Oh, wow, there's this whole other way to engage with books when we start talking about it." Like it takes it to another level.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I find it hard to find voracious readers in my life outside of BookTube. So finding the community online has been wonderful because reading is usually such a solitary activity. And if you don't have like a book club or someone to share that reading experience with, like a spouse or a friend, it's a
Yeah.
very solitary kind of just you in your own book type activity.
Mhm.
So to have the community definitely adds a whole nother level of motivation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really special thing, that we're very blessed with in this time and age. Because I think it's the same for a lot of us too, like, I know it's like that for me. There's only so much that my husband wants to hear about the books that I'm reading. So, and I have some friends who read, but I've always found that to be the case, like, I just wanna talk about books, and
Yeah.
even with friends that read, I feel like I wanna talk about it on a level they don't wanna talk about it. Like, they
Yeah.
wanna talk about it for a short while, but I
Yeah.
keep wanting to talk about it, and so I found this community, and I thought, wow, these people don't wanna stop talking. That's
Right.
great. This is
Yeah,
like the best place ever. So,
Absolutely.
exactly. Yeah.
yeah. What about you, Isa? How would you answer the why read question for you right now?
So I was thinking very hard about this question, and I came up with two main reasons. The first one is that it allows me to connect with myself. I think there is a lot of escapism involved usually with reading, but for me it has that part, but it's especially that it allows me to pause everything and just center myself. I think I enter in a similar, like in a flow state. It's very similar to what I can imagine we get with mindfulness. And after reading, I get this inner peace, this feeling of being, just happy and content. And I feel that at my core, I'm doing something that I should be doing, because I just feel so good afterwards. And I think it really helps me to keep moving forward with my life and in another more focused and aware way. So that's one. But then also, I really think it's very fun. It is very fun. And at least for me, I think it's a great enhancer of life. Like, I love it. For example, now I love spooky season. I love Halloween, all that kind of stuff. And I am loving reading all of these gothic stories. Like, I just think it just makes this month better and life better. Like, oh, I just love that. And how can you surround yourself with the stories to feel that way? I feel if you get a good book, obviously, that feeling lingers with you and it passes through your life and through your days. And I think that's magical. So yeah, I think those are the two reasons. But definitely I'm tempted with Netflix and YouTube. So I am tempted, but I'm trying.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I am too at times. So that was beautiful what you said about flow. I actually did a video about this a while back, not too long ago, maybe a month or two ago, about flow states. And I read the book Flow
Yeah,
by Csikszentmihalyi, who passed
yeah,
on last year. We're sad to hear, but his theory on flow theory, on getting lost in activity, like a
yes,
rock climber feeling one with the rock, or the runner who has the runner's high. I read that book over 10 years ago. And when he talked about when you're in a flow state, you lose the concept, you lose your self consciousness. You're not
totally,
conscious that the fact that, like, you might in the back of your mind, in the periphery, I'm a person, I'm reading a book, these are words on a page, but you're not really, that's not where your focus is. You're in the story. You've
absolutely,
lost yourself in the story. And it's like you said, Isa, it's like its own kind of magic to have that
totally,
experience with a book.
totally.
And so, yeah, I felt like that really inspired me when I read that particular book too.
Mm,
And just to notice that, like, I love what you said though, too, about when you get out of that experience to feel as though it's enhanced you in some way. Because that's actually what he says too about flow states, whether it's a flow state from, again, exercise or from
yeah,
any sort of endeavor. He says that you lose self consciousness when you're in the state, but then when you come out of it, you expand the concept of who you thought you were. So it's like, whoa, somehow I'm expanded as a
totally.
result of doing this. And I feel like we all experience that with reading. But I also love what you said about reading seasonally. And I wanted to ask you both about this because I noticed that both of you have a lot of great spooky season recommendations. Jessie, I know that you did a top horror books recommendation. And do you talk to me about seasonal reading and your experience with that? So, Jessie, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I really my seasonal reading is only present during the fall season. Like, I don't seasonally read any
That's
other time of year except if there's something about the fall, and I
Mhm.
love Halloween, and I feel like getting into, like, the Halloween spirit, I don't know, like, a spooky book gets me there, gets me in the mood for it. I love it. I love fall time reading scary horror books. I adore it, but I don't read seasonally any other time of year. This is it. So, this is when I save all my horror books to read.
That
But
is so funny. Yeah.
it And it's very interesting because I do think that in booktube and especially in the fantasy niche, there is a lot, like a wave of people really linking reading with fall, and there's a lot of
Yeah,
seasonal content that you don't get as much in winter,
yeah,
spring or summer. It's just that a lot of people, and I think it kind of makes sense in my mind, but like changing weather, and then you cozy up and you read a little bit, and that is a theme for me. Like, I am waiting from September to start and see all of these videos coming that I don't see in any other season. So to me, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Autumn.
Wow. Wow, that's a really good point. It's funny, Jesse, because I feel like I'm the same way. I don't think I've ever been a seasonal reader until the last couple of years, and then I've started to embrace fall more because it's a season I didn't used to like, because then for me, I know it's crazy, because with fall, it's like, I always have this feeling of like, "Oh, man, that means winter's around the corner and it's gonna start getting colder," and I've
Yeah.
always just felt like summer was my comfort zone,
Mm.
but nowadays, I feel very differently about it. I've started to just fall into the fall vibes, so to speak, and I think doing some seasonal reading for me has changed me a little bit. I just recently finished actually, I mostly listened to this, but I picked up the physical copy. I just recently read Pet Sematary,
Good
and it
one.
was the most perfect read. There was something that was well, it's a very dark book for one thing. uh, it's a really deep exploration of grief too, which I wasn't quite well, I did know that going in, but I think it's a bit darker than even the movie, which I was familiar with. But there was something about reading this really dark and creepy fall vibe book when the weather was dreary outside and the leaves were falling that just
Yeah.
added to the experience, and it made me feel like I was embracing the fall season more. So it's kind of funny how that works.
Yeah, it, like, makes you feel more present in the time of year you're in, like, more present with today by
Yeah.
kind of focusing your reading on the season. It's interesting. I like how you put it, Joanna, about, like, making you feel yeah, like you're not dreading it anymore. You're kind of excited for it and excited to embrace it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And Issa, you were saying that sometimes do other things that compete with your reading. You said something about BookTube as well,
Yeah.
watching BookTube videos.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That's usually a thing for me too. I'm like, if I listen to an audiobook, I know it's a good audiobook when I'm actually listening to that more than watching BookTube because I find
Right?
myself watching a lot of BookTube.
Totally.
Same. The exact
Yeah.
So
same.
Yeah.
totally. I mean,
But this is one that I just couldn't stop listening to. Well, I did actually, that's not true. I in some ways I couldn't stop listening to it, and then other times it got so dark that I'm like, "Okay, I have to pause for a little while, maybe watch a lighthearted video, watch a fun fantasy books video or a Jessie May video, and then come back," because it was so heavy.
It's a tough
But yeah, I can relate to that too, as
yeah.
pulling my
I
attention.
Yeah.
I definitely have that book on my TBR for this month. So
Good.
I'm excited that you guys have read it and love it.
Yeah,
So
it's a good one.
yeah.
It's heavy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and read some comments here.
Yay.
The last few years, I lost my passion for films or TV shows as an activity. I can't focus. I can't sit still for more than 30 minutes looking at a
Oh,
screen, but I can read for hours.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Do you all watch shows or?
Yes. Yes. I'm binging Suits right now on Netflix. Never
yeah.
seen it before, and my husband had watched it previously, and now I'm hooked. Hey, this is taking away my reading time. And there was something, Issa, that you said earlier about why you read. I thought you put it really well about after you get done with reading, you have, a chunk of time dedicated to reading. There is something where you feel so productive, you feel so almost accomplished
Yeah.
having just had that chunk of time dedicated to reading that I personally don't find that kind of fulfillment through other hobbies that I have. There's
Yeah.
something about finishing a book. You don't get the same feeling finishing like a TV series or
No.
finishing a movie
Yeah.
or finishing a video game. Well, not for me. Other people might feel differently about video games, but like there's something about finishing a book or finishing a reading sprint that makes you feel so productive and accomplished and just good. And
Yeah.
I really don't feel that with any other hobby. And I think that that's a great point about why I read is that it makes me feel good about what I'm
Yeah.
doing with my time.
I
That's
guess
a
for me,
really good point. Oh, go ahead, Issa.
no, please go.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say that's a really good point. I remember when I was much younger, I found myself watching way more TV than I wanted to at the time. I kept realizing I'm just watching so much TV, and I stopped to reflect on it, and I thought about what about what shows I was watching were staying with me, were having any lingering effect or impacting me in a positive way at all? And I realized almost nothing I was watching did that. I did find one show that I found did have a positive effect on me, but aside from that, a lot of what I was watching wasn't.
Yeah.
And it just started to make me think, I don't know, just make me reflect on that. I think that's a good thing to reflect on now and then is what about your pastimes is serving you or giving you something that feels fulfilling or productive? And maybe what is not just kind of making you stay, maybe in a blah state or
Yeah.
not
Right.
adding much to your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's always a good thing to kind of question.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love what you said there because I think that for me it really depends also with TV series. If I find something or a movie that really I like and that while I am watching it, I am feeling things, then I feel that my time has been well spent and invested. But then if I'm just passing the time and I'm not seeing something that I am particularly liking, but I'm, too bored to even change that, then for me it's like what I'm doing with my time. But I can see how a lot of people can get that fulfillment from watching, a TV series or something like that. It just, for me, it's harder to find those TV series or movies than it's to find books that I really enjoy, that I feel as fulfilled when I'm reading them. But,
Mm.
but there.
Yeah, that's a really yeah, I feel the same way. Like there are some shows that do uplift you or that do I have found a couple, not very
Yeah,
many,
exactly.
but
Like I can tell you the three.
yeah, exactly. But it can become habitual where you're watching stuff and you're just like doing it to fill the time and not really consciously watching. So
Yeah.
how does that affect reading though? Do you feel like you both put a lot of thought into what you read or do you pick up books a little bit more spontaneously? How do you choose what you read?
Oh, so that's like a whole nother discussion. It's interesting what you just said, Isa, about finding the right shows for you, and it's kind of the same with books. I've recently, in the past couple years, since having kids, honestly, I have been much better about not finishing books that I'm not enjoying. So
It's good.
it's kind of like the same with watching TV shows that aren't bringing you any fulfillment. I have that same experience now with books,
Yeah.
and it's like we just never in this lifetime will get through every book we
No.
want to read. And with the very little free time I have now with 2 kids, I'm like, "Okay, if I'm not enjoying this 100%, why am I doing it?" Um,
Totally.
so I think that that's helped me a lot find things that I'm really passionate about. So and I didn't even really answer your question.
Oh, that's
How
okay.
do I select which books I read? I think part of it is since so much of my channel drives what I read, I think a lot of it is balancing what's really popular right now in the community because I want to be in on the discussions. I want to understand the hype. I just read Jade City because it's like I want to get in on the Greenbone saga and I want to know why everyone's talking about it. So I think it's balancing that with also trying to find books that aren't as well known, that are maybe a little bit more underrated, underhyped, that you want to promote on the channel, that you want to get more people to read,
Mhm.
because that's why presumably quite a few people watch BookTube is to find recommendations maybe they haven't heard of before. So serving that purpose, but then also trying to get in on the hype with some of these other books so that you can be a part of the conversation. So I try to balance it, reading one really hyped book and then maybe reading one that I haven't heard anyone talk about and let's see if it's any good.
Mm.
So that's kind of how I've been trying to find books to read. It's hard
Yeah.
balancing it all.
Yeah. Speaking on that point, do you find I noticed that this was affecting me at one certain point in time and maybe not as much anymore, but do you ever find that you're more inclined to pick up a book if there's like a hype wave going on? And then if that hype wave kind of passes, I guess that does affect me still. I won't lie.
Mhm.
Like for example, I think is it The King's Justice? I can't remember the name
Oh,
of
The
the book.
Justice of
Yes, the
Kings.
Justice of Kings.
I think that's the one, yeah,
Yeah.
and the sequel came out this last year.
Mhm.
I haven't read that series, but I know when it first came out, everybody was picking it up and talking
Yeah.
about it, and I wanted to pick it up at the time, and then I waited long enough, and then I haven't picked it up. And now I might pick it up still, but I don't
Yeah.
feel as much energy towards picking it up or
Yeah.
as much motivation. Does that affect you at all, Jessie?
It does. Yeah, I mean, are we gonna say the dreaded one that's going through the community right now?
Oh, go ahead. Sure.
The fourth wing, the big
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yes.
no, I've not picked up Fourth Wing for anyone
Yeah.
curious, and I
Yes.
probably won't for a while. But yeah, I think that does affect me. I think for fantasy, since that's my primary genre, and most of the books that I read on my channel are fantasy. One thing I'm trying to do more of is not start a series that isn't finished, or at least has a sequel out. So actually, that kind of helps me hold myself back on buying a lot of these new releases, because if it doesn't have a sequel out, then I'd probably have to reread that book before I continued on, and I just don't have time to reread right now with everything going on. So I think that that's one thing that's helped me kind of hold off on riding the hype train, if you will. But then that a series is good if it's still hyped even after all of the books are out. Like, I'm thinking of the Dandelion Dynasty, the Greenbone Saga. Like, those books are so hyped still to this day in this community. And I mean, that first book is pretty old now in both of those respective series. So I think that that's a really good indicator of books that I find I'm really wanting to prioritize, if it can keep that hype even after all the books in the series come out.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like, there could be almost like consequent waves that keep happening. So I guess
Yeah.
I even was thinking about Justice of Kings because I know Jimmy's reading that right now. I'm really enjoying it. So it's making me curious again. And another one that has recently made me curious, and I have to pull this up, is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. I haven't read this, but this was gifted to me very kindly from Isa. So thank you so much, Isa. And I'm very excited about this book because I did hear wonderful things when it first came out. I remember Evie from She Was Only Evie read it and gave a wonderful review, and she and I tend to align quite a bit on our book tastes. And so it made me excited when I heard about that. And recently, I have heard about it more and more. I think Angela from Literature Science Alliance, she mentioned this in her Finally Fall book tag. And I didn't even realize it was a fall themed book.
Yes.
So it got me even more excited. And then with it being fall, it's just picking up the energy for me. I'm hoping to get to this. I don't know if I can this fall, but I'm really hoping to get to it this fall. And it's absolutely stunning.
It's
Yes, you loved it, right?
it's a weird book, but it's really good.
Oh, did you like it?
I loved it. Yeah, I
Yay.
loved it.
Wow. Oh man, I'm so excited to pick it up now.
Yeah, like Jessie stays, it's phenomenal. So yes, that is not no. Yes, I really, really like your suggestions. So I think it is true. So hopefully you enjoy it, Joanna. Hopefully.
Yeah. I hope so too. Yeah, I'm really excited to get to it. And there was something else I was going to ask about that. Anyhow, yeah. Let's see what the chat is saying here.
Yeah.
If you want a book to be reviewed all over BookTube, go to Patrick. Yeah, he seems to bring the unknown to the forefront.
Yeah.
That's true. I have picked up a few books because of Patrick, for sure.
I have so many books on my TBR because of him.
Yeah.
He's a good way to select which books needs to be read.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's true what you said, Jessie, about how you balance what you kind of want to read with what you think you need to read also for the channel and for your audience. And if you have that mission of also bringing books that are not as known, you need to, get to that part as well. I think that was beautifully said. So yeah, I think for me,
I watched this wonderful discussion that you had with Elliot Brooks, Jessie, on, I think it was like on BookTube just recently. You two talked about BookTube, and you were talking about how much one of the things that you really appreciated on your channel was bringing attention to underrated or underhyped books, thanks to your viewers.
Oh yeah, I did a couple videos polling my subscribers to say, what is a book that you wish was more talked about on BookTube, was more hyped, and I found so many book recommendations through that video. And it was so much fun getting to do that video because it was something that I wanted to see personally. So I figured if I want to see it, maybe others want to see it too. So I really liked doing those. I should do some
Yeah.
more. I haven't done
And
that in a while.
yeah, and you too, Issa, I think you've done a video like that as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you find or pick books that you think your audience might like that don't get enough attention?
So I think that's a very, very tough question because
Yeah.
for me, as I pick books, I think it has really changed. Since I started to consume more booktube, I think everything has changed for me because here in Spain, we usually don't have translated the same, all of the books. And it usually takes a time and a long time, usually, depending on the book. Obviously, Fourth Wing, it's already translated, obviously. But that's kind of like what it's the wave here. It's not the wave, really, of what has been released. So when I started consuming BookTube, I started realizing that I had a lot of catch up to do with a lot of series that were very well loved within the niche already and that I did not even know about. So, when I started selecting those, and I have not read Malazan, sorry, but, and that was translated, so that's not excuse, but I know there are series that I need to read and that I'm started to cherry pick because I need to get to those stories that I believe are going to be 5 stars or that have a lot of potential because a lot of people have already read it and kind of like proved that are good books. But then I also love to go to more, underrated authors. I mean, Adrian Tchaikovsky, personally, I believe he's amazing. And, or, obviously I am in love with sort of Kagan and things like that. And I am always in awe when I find these books that are kind of recommended in BookTube, but then I go to Goodreads and they are also suggested to me. And I actually use the tool as a way to find books. And then I see the ratings and I'm like, how this book has only been rated by 1,000 people? Like, what are we doing here? Obviously, not everyone that reads rates, but it's still mind-blowing to me. And I am really trying to convey the feeling that not everything that you see or like the books that you see displayed at a bookstore are the best ones, and there are others that are known not as much, but that you can find them and that are really as amazing or more amazing. So it is a little bit complex. But again, like for me, I think the Dandelion Dynasty has just been translated this year here in Spain. It's the first time, at least, that I've seen that. So it's kind of like coming really, really late. So it's, I think, a little bit different. But
That is impressive, Issa. And I'm actually really impressed because I think with one of your more recent books, book recommendation videos, your horror book one, I was
yeah,
impressed because you were pulling, I think actually your witch book, the one that you just put out, you were
yeah,
putting out books that have been recent BookTube darlings, but then you
yeah,
were also pulling up a bunch of books that I hadn't seen talked about in a while, that maybe don't get talked about enough, or maybe they were really good, but they missed the spotlight because they came out at the same time as Fourth Wing or
yeah.
something like that. And so I think you do a good job in your videos of
Thank
presenting the mix of both kinds of books, like both things that BookTube, would know about, but also things that might have gone a little under the radar for various
you.
reasons. And just
Yeah,
also understanding that sometimes, I know you were making a different point about Goodreads, but like sometimes the things that we think are big on BookTube might not be as big
yeah.
outside of BookTube too.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's just that I don't necessarily think that a book, because it's big or because it has hype, it needs to be better. So in my mind, it's never that, never that. So I'm always, when I'm hearing a story, I think, oh, this story seems interesting. I'm going to read it. Or what I see or the reviews that I'm seeing, that sounds like something that I can like. And then I go and say like, okay, but this book is not known. But for me, it's like, okay, fine, like whatever, because it sounds really down my alley. So why not read that? I'm still not that, or I mean, I know that I have a lot of things to read and I will cherry pick them slowly but surely, but still there's a lot of time that I can just I feel free to just pick whatever book makes sense. And then if I like it, I will recommend that.
Yeah. That's
every time.
fantastic. Yeah,
Bible.
that's good
Yeah.
advice in general too, and I think that's the wonderful thing about like I said, ever since I started a channel, I think it started to make me hone in on, okay, what is it about this book that I really love? How can I articulate that? Can I identify that? Can I identify what in this book is not working for me? Because I think that that's actually been a bigger challenge for me. Like sometimes it's easier for me to figure out why I loved a book than to pinpoint why a book was just meh for me or why I didn't connect with it. And but the more you're able to do that, the more you're able to kind of see past the gloss of like, this is a hyped book. That means I will love it. You'll be able to pick out, okay, what is this person saying about the book that I think might appeal to my personal reading taste, for example. So,
Yeah, that's a great point. I still am struggling with some books pinpointing exactly why it is that that isn't a 5 star. I think the hardest books to talk about are like the 3 star books, where it's
Yes.
like you don't love it and you don't hate it. It's just somewhere in the middle. And I always have the hardest time talking about those. So that's why I've been trying to DNF what I think is going to be a 3 star book more often, because I'm like, if it's just average,
Yeah.
why spend time on it when I can be spending time on something that's 5 star feeling.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. Like what is it about us as individual readers that makes us love a character, for example? Because something I often hear in booktube videos is I just didn't care. Like I was reading about
Mhm.
this character and I just didn't care. And that's
Yeah.
a very honest reaction to a book. And at the same time, I always get curious, like, but what is it about that character that didn't make you care?
Yeah.
And maybe the flip question could be, what about a character makes you care? And so a book that the 3 of us all loved, by the way, you brought up Adrian Tchaikovsky, Isa. We all 3 loved Guns of the Dawn.
Yes.
So, what
Yeah.
was it about Emily Marshwick that made you love that character?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's so hard to pinpoint. Lisa, you answer that first. I'll
I mean, I think you should, and I 100% I'm one of those booktubers that I'm like, I just couldn't connect with the character.
Mhm.
Next point, and I never think that that's not enough for other people. But I think for me, a book that allows me to feel for that character or to understand or just, yeah, to be empathetic for that character, it's what gets me. And with Emily, she, from the beginning, like you start in the future and then, you start seeing what happened to her life. And I saw her in a way that I was not necessarily able to relate, but the story that I was reading seemed like a story that I could imagine. I saw her displaying so much courage, so much valor, so much, a lot of things that I've admired with her. Like I am the eldest daughter, and I'm gonna go to war, and this is what I'm gonna do, and this is gonna be hard. And I thought those decisions were really hard. They were explained really good, and I understood the inner thoughts that allowed her to make that decision. So I think that I felt conveyed to, follow the story and to feel for her because I was able to understand, I guess, what she was feeling. I studied psychology. I'm not a psychologist, but I basically am very, interested about what are the inner thoughts of our characters. And when I don't have that, I'm usually like, okay, fine. Which it's something that happened to me with the Grace of Kings. But with Emily, I was able to understand her. I was fascinated by her, and yeah, and it's a great book.
It's so
It is a
good.
really good book.
It is.
It's a really solid standalone, and it does some things that I've not seen other authors do, especially at the end, the way it subverts certain trope
Yeah,
expectations.
yeah, yeah.
And it just has one of the most satisfying endings I think I've ever read. But I love what you were saying about her courage, and you do get insight into her inner thoughts, but I thought it was really well done that like she's not overly sentimental either. Like she goes into being a soldier and she takes
Yes.
on that soldier role, but she's not too hard either. She's not, the hard badass girl. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She has something about her that grounds you, that makes you feel like you can relate to her, but, um, at the same time, she just she's not too hard around the edges, but at the same time, she's not a soft pushover. She has a
Yeah.
good balance in her character.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
beautifully said.
And I like that she, like, embraces her femininity, if that's how you say it. It's so hard to spell.
I have a hard time with that word too.
Embraces her femininity, but she also, like you just mentioned, is willing to go out there and be brave and be boots on the ground and get along with this kind of outcast group of guys, like in the swamp, and get dirty and
Yes.
get up again and again and again. And I loved that about her. And I just like when things aren't too easy for a character.
Mhm.
And I think that that's something that we could talk a lot about in just like media in general, the like strong female character. I
Yeah.
like when things aren't too easy and you can see that character going through a lot of trials and tribulations to get better and to fail and get back up again. I think that that's so much more admirable than just automatically being good at everything. So that's something that I really value in my main characters, is seeing them go through the lowest of lows only to get back up again and have the highs. That's something that I very much value. And like Kaladin from like the Stormlight. So that's something that I'm very much drawn to in a main character, is like someone who fails but comes back out of it stronger. Yeah, I don't like the characters who are just, I don't think anybody likes the characters who are just good at everything. So.
No, that's a really good point. I feel like I feel like there's a thirst in us as readers, as fantasy readers, to want to see real resilience. And I was actually reading in a nonfiction book recently about how you can't have resilience without discomfort. Like there's no way to have resilience if you're comfortable all the time. Resilience comes when you're in uncomfortable situations and in conflict, and it's not easy. So I don't know. I do appreciate that. I think that's a really good insight, Jesse, about like things that we love about a character is to see that they're not going to just get off easy or scot free. Um, I think something else that I really love about characters that's kind of related to that and related to her journey too is, and this is something I realized over recent months, is when a character has revelation, when they
Yeah.
realize things aren't as they seemed, or their views about the world and the situation might be a little bit different, or they have to let go of it, they have to shift it, and their approach to having to shift that in that journey, that pivot point, if an author can pull that off, I'm always so impressed with it. Always so impressed with that.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think like the opposite. It's why sometimes the chosen one not necessarily work for me. Like when there's a chosen one that it's super overpowered and you see that every adventure or every quest is passed with, almost no conflict. I'm like, I can be here for the fun of it, but I am not necessarily, being marked by this story because I don't necessarily see that it's real in the sense of how we face situations, right? And on the other hand, like because of that, when someone does the chosen one really good, then for me it's one of my favorite tropes because like, oh yes, like this person went above and beyond to do whatever they wanted to do, and now they're different. And I found that really, really inspiring. I always find that trope very inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'm going to highlight this comment here. I think humorous characters are my favorite. Matt, Tyrion, Glocta, Merlin, and Warlord. Yeah, I love Merlin and Warlord, and the princess in the Black Cauldron, which I have not read that, but I love those particular characters as well. I think they also, some of those subvert certain tropes, like Tyrion, for example. I think we get a lot of dwarves, especially in older fantasy, but Tyrion is actually a really brilliant,
Mhm.
fascinating person. Like he's an in-depth character. He's not just a cartoonish kind of character. And that's what made me love him so much. He's funny too. And he's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. But you actually see how he's brilliant. And with Glocta, I don't know. I don't know what it is about Glocta. Just somebody who like
Yeah.
he's just funny. He's just hilarious.
Sarcastic, cynical.
Cynical.
He, like, speaks to a part of all of us that it's like he's thinking the things that we're all thinking.
Yes.
Like, the back of our mind, like, that cynical part of us can, like, all relate to Glockta.
That's a really good point, especially the way, like, Abercrombie does his dialogue, because 'cause he'll say one thing and then think the opposite thing, and it's
Right. I
hilarious in
know.
contrast.
I
It's
can
like,
relate to
yeah,
that.
he's saying what you don't wanna say out loud. He's very relatable in that way.
Yes.
Agree.
And Merlin in the Warlord Chronicles, he's kind of like the dark Merlin. So if you think of Sword in the
Mhm.
Stone, the Merlin in that particular cartoon, that Merlin, well, he's kind of gruff sometimes, but this Merlin is just wicked. So he kind of takes a different spin on the mentor trope in a way.
Okay.
That's
Those are
awesome.
really good examples. I guess I like that. I think that that's a really fun way that characters can or that authors can play with your expectation, like, "Oh, yeah, the chosen one is maybe not always so smart or always so strategic or whatever, or maybe the mentor isn't always so, fatherly or motherly or maybe, just kinda playing with those expectations." But I also love characters that are contradictory in a way. So,
Yeah.
like, Logan Ninefingers, for example. He's the
Mm.
bloody 9 sometimes, but then sometimes he's got some great advice. And he seems like a good friend and seems very warm. And it's like
Yeah.
these 2 aspects in the same character. So I think when you have contradictions, this can be fun too.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I always find that, um, I love characters who have to the morally gray kind of
Yeah.
phrase is very much, a trend right now in the community, I would say. Everybody's looking for morally gray characters, but I truly do love characters who aren't necessarily the good guys. They're the characters who have to do the bad things, and you kinda have to root for them anyway, because
Yeah.
it's like either the other side is just as bad or worse, or like there is just like no right and wrong. I love examining that type of stuff through like a morally gray character. So, and then my favorite character in the one we were just talking about, Joe
No.
Abercrombie's First Law trilogy. Thank you. First Law. My favorite is Giselle because he's just
No.
Mm.
buffoon. I just
Whoa,
I
hot
love him.
take.
He's such a buffoon. So I love characters like that too that just kind of make me laugh.
Yeah, he's so funny. Have you 2 read on past the first trilogy in First
No,
Law?
not yet. I need
No.
to.
I've only read actually the blade itself.
Oh, wow. I'm so
Oh wow.
excited to hear your both of what both of you think, especially of the second trilogy, because I
Yeah.
think his female characters are
Mm.
some of the best female characters I've read in fantasy in that second trilogy. They're so good. They're
Okay.
so fun. I don't know. I guess different people feel differently. I know some people still love the first trilogy more, but I think I loved I did. I love the Age of Madness more.
Okay. I need to read
Yeah.
it.
Even
Yeah.
though the first trilogy is incredible though too. And the standalones are great too. But yeah, and yeah, those are great for female characters as well. I do love Cersei Lannister, and here's another character with great contradictions because she is
Yeah,
wicked, she's terrible at
She is.
times, but then at the same time, you can't deny how much she really loves her children. She has some vulnerability at times that she shows, especially as you read on, that
Yeah.
yeah,
make you care about her.
Yeah.
yeah. I love Cersei, and I love a character that always feels like they're kind of like one step ahead of everyone
Mm.
else, and Cersei very much felt to me like that at times.
Mm.
I guess more so in the later seasons of the show, especially, which we don't need to talk about the last season, but the before season 8, when the show actually ended at season 7, uh, she definitely had that, like, one step ahead kind of quality that I really like in a character too.
Yeah, fascinating character, absolutely.
Although
Um,
almost
yeah.
all characters in Game of Thrones, I think, are grey. And
Yeah.
I mean, I can maybe see that Jon is not a grey character necessarily, but the rest, I think almost all of them are grey characters. And Cersei, it's such a fantastic role. Also, Jamie, right? Like, I hate you or don't. Like, I'm very confused. I'm not sure. So it's an amazing, and I agree with what you were saying, Jessie, that morally grey characters are more popular now. I don't know if you guys, well, I know Jessie that you did, but the Poppy War it's such a good example of great characters. And I was so mad, but at the same time I was so fascinated about the decisions that the main character did. It is very fascinating. Such a wild
I
ride.
liked Rin. So many people can't stand Rin, and
I know, I hate it.
I liked her because she was not the good guy
I
at
hate
all. Was doing terrible, terrible things, and I was like, this is kind of fascinating to follow. I really like her character. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed reading about Rin. I mean, she's not likable,
No.
but she's understandable. And there were moments where I did feel like, okay, she feels a little bit like a mustache twirling villain at times. I won't lie. I had that thought, like at the end of the second book, Dragon Republic.
Yeah.
There were a couple moments where I thought, okay, but at the same time, I felt like given what she's gone through in the past, I felt like it made sense. I liked
Yeah.
the way I liked her paranoia and the way she would latch on to people and then lash out at people when they get close to her and then cling to people. Like she just kind of had this back and forth again, this kind of contradictory nature that was really interesting to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also I know that Jessie, I think I saw in a recent video you were talking about how you want more friendships in fantasy, and you have a good friendship in that trilogy, which I
Yeah.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Kite and Rin.
Yes. Yeah. There's definitely, I think fantasy romance is now kind of becoming its own genre entirely. But there was a time before that kind of exploded because of TikTok. I assume I'm not on TikTok, but I assume that's how the fantasy romance genre got so popular that it's now even become its own thing. But for a time, there was a lot of that mixed in with just general fantasy that you wouldn't classify as like a fantasy romance. So it was seeming like a lot of the fantasy books I was reading, there was always a subplot of a romance or something. And, just this never my favorite thing to read in a fantasy. That's not what I go to fantasy for. So if it takes over a fantasy plot, if it's like a subplot that's well developed, that's great. But if it takes over the plot, one instance that I found with this was Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lintana. I was so excited for that one. And it felt like the romance in that story really took over. And some people loved it for it, but I just didn't. So I love a good friendship. When I find a good platonic friendship in a fantasy book, I love to scream about it because it's something that I don't see as often nowadays with how popular romance is in the genre.
Yeah.
That's such a good point. I did not really connect with Daughter of the Moon Goddess personally. I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of another subject in a way. I listened to that on audio, and I don't know if it was because I still can't figure out if it was because I just really didn't like the story or if it was the audiobook narrator that was affecting my enjoyment of it. But it did get into a big love triangle that I just didn't relate to at all. I just didn't personally connect with, which is funny because I'm not anti love triangle. Like Guns of the Dawn has a love triangle in it. But the way you were saying that it focuses, like Daughter of the Moon Goddess got so focused on the romance, with Guns of the Dawn, it still managed to keep a broader thematic focus of war, and the love triangle was just part of that. It wasn't like overly focused on that. Like, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I
it's
feel
like
it was
I didn't even remember that it had a love triangle.
I don't think people even think about it.
Yeah, that's how
it's
kind of
subtle.
backseat that romance takes in that story.
So my theory behind the love triangle is that people don't notice it when it's done well.
Yeah, that's
'Cause
a good point. Yeah.
yeah, because I honestly and I would love to hear your thoughts on this too, but, I'm sorry, you said did you have something to say? Because I could go off on a few more points.
No, go.
Okay, because I was gonna say one of my theories is, like I said, that people don't notice the love triangle if it's done well, but another thing too is that I feel like a lot of people and I would love to hear if you agree with this or not, I've been really exploring, and I really wanna do a video on this at some point, but I feel like I still need to do more research on this topic. I feel like a lot of people, when they say they don't wanna read YA fantasy or YA books, then one of the number one tropes that they wanna get away from is the love triangle. And when I thought about it, I realized, like, some of my favorite adult fantasy books actually have love triangles in them, but nobody would notice it. It's like, that's one of them. Yeah. So I would wonder, do you think that that's true though, that a lot of people associate YA with love triangles? And I just would love to hear your two's thoughts about YA genre and the judgment towards YA in general.
Yeah. Ethan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think.
Who is? No way.
So I did tell Issa that Alan might pop in, but I wanted to surprise you, Jessie.
I know all the secret codes. Hi, Jessie.
Hi. How are you?
Tired.
Tired. I hear you.
Tired.
So I just have to go on a side tangent really quickly and talk about Alan does sometimes spontaneously come into the Y Read discussions. He was my very first Y Read guest, and I told him he had the rights to pop in anytime he wants. But it's really special because, and the reason I had Alan on as my first Y Read guest is because Alan was the biggest influence on me starting my channel. And, but I could also say Jessie May might be the biggest influence on me starting my channel because she's the one who introduced me to Alan's channel when she shouted him out in one of her videos.
Yay.
I owe my entire channel to Jessie. If Jessie said,
No, you
hey, Alan,
don't.
I need you to muster up the troops. We're going to go kill some people. I'll be like, all right, let's go.
You would have been just fine, Alan.
No, like I had 120 subs and Jessie shouted me out and I had 360 the next day.
You would have been fine. You would have
Amazing.
gotten there just as easily.
No,
You're
the
fine.
shelf space was like all of our first like plates and the bread emoji.
Yeah.
And
I'll never forget that. Yeah. I remember
and
that.
harassing people as they enter in the welcome room.
Yeah.
Being like, look,
So
no one is
funny.
providing pizza here at all. So these welcome messages are dirty lies.
So funny.
Yeah.
That's right, Jimmy. It is typical fascist behavior, being just dropping in when I feel like it.
I love that.
Yeah, so that the story behind that is because I followed Jessie's channel, loved her channel, still love her channel, obviously. And one day she shouted out Alan. And at the time, as much as I love BookTube, I always felt kind of like I didn't really belong in the community because I'm a little bit older and I just didn't see my age group represented. And I mean, part of that could have been algorithm things and at the time, but the majority of people I followed were a lot younger. And then I found Alan's channel and I not only loved his channel, but I was excited because he was a little more seasoned.
Because I'm old.
Yeah. She wanted to say that.
But not only
She
that,
wanted to say that.
but not only that, but Alan, it was just so entertaining. I actually went
catching
back and
strays.
watched his backlist of videos at the time, which there weren't that many. I think you were still a fairly new channel, Alan. But I was like, who is this guy? He is so funny. And I wish he were my history teacher. And then Alan kept saying, join Shelf Space. Everybody join Shelf Space, which was Jessie May's Discord.
Yes.
And so I joined Shelf Space because of Alan. And then I started interacting more with the community. And
I had never used Discord. And in one of Jessie's videos, she said that she used to live in Japan. And so I messaged her on Instagram and was like, Japan, I studied in Japan. That's freaking awesome. And we talked about Japan. And then she was like, you should come join the Discord. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. And she sent me a link and I went in and I'm like, what is any of this? Like, how do I use this program? And, you know, I had not really realized that I had reached the technological era that I don't know how to use anything.
No.
I do now. Like, I didn't realize I did, like, you know, I
No.
had no idea how to work Discord.
But Discord was also very new for me. And I think the first time that I also got to know Discord was because of Jessie's Discord. And I was like, I will get here and things will happen. And it did not. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So it's not you. It's
I know. When I
It's
first
Discord.
started Shelf Space, I had no idea what I was doing. And then bread emojis got thrown in by someone. Just like Sam or something threw in bread emojis. I was like,
No, it was me. Don't let Sam take my credit. It was me.
like custom little bread emojis. Do you remember?
Oh, the customizable. Yeah, that was
all the custom
that
emojis
definitely
that
was Sam,
came
the
in.
customized one.
I
don't know where that-
funny.
Oh, because I didn't know what the emojis were. I couldn't see them on my phone. So I was like, why does this smiley face have a starfish on his head? but I think it was like the exploding head one. I
Yeah.
was like, look at the starfish on this thing's head. It was a mushroom cloud. I couldn't see it. It's too small.
Yeah, they're so tiny sometimes. You have to like really use
I
your
was playing
magnifying
with the
glass.
emoji. Those were good times. What happened? What
No.
happened to those days?
Then everybody had a Discord and
I had a
everybody-
kid.
it just kind of
I
exploded.
Jesse, I am also having one, and I don't
know. I'm so
know
excited.
what to do about it.
You're about to have no time, no
I
sleep.
refuse. No, like it.
What? You refuse?
Yes, I'm going to walk over to it and be like, look, I need you to sleep through the night because I got to read. So, and if it doesn't, I'll be like, I will put you outside where the dogs are, or where the dogs aren't inside. The dogs are inside. I'll put you outside instead of the dogs. So
So
and I'll
good.
just put it.
Perfect parenting.
It'll be,
I love
look,
it.
it'll be fine. If history teaches you anything, it is that a friendly wildlife animal will come and take care of it.
Your kid's gonna be like Mowgli from the Jungle Book.
You know what? Those are useful
I'm so
skills. I don't
glad.
have any of those skills.
Animals.
No, that's useful.
The second it can work, off to the silver mines or the salt.
Oh man.
I don't know what to tell you.
Inspiring,
Like, got to pull
inspiring.
its own weight. Everyone else has a job in the house. We have 5 pets that loaf about and don't do anything. The child will go to work.
Oh wow.
Here you go. Here's your bib.
Oh my god, I'm so excited for that kid.
You could have your child help run your booktube channel.
There you
I
go.
will
about
have
that?
the child mine Bitcoin for me.
Yes, yes.
This is gonna
I mean,
happen.
the thing is that if he starts doing it well, you're gonna have a problem.
Yeah.
Well, I just kids are too expensive. Kids are too expensive. I don't have one, and they're too expensive.
Yeah.
Wow.
They're a little pricey,
Yeah,
especially
they
if
do
you just
seem
want to buy them everything.
I just want to take the dang thing to the doctor, and it's going to put me out of house and home.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, tell me about it.
At least you don't live too far from Disney World. So
Oh.
when that comes around.
We have to do Disney trips, Alan.
I mean,
Wow.
totally. I haven't been to Disney since 2001, and Christina hasn't been since before that. And she really desperately wants to take a child to Disney World. But it's like, I have friends that are teachers who go to Disney all the time, and I'm like, on what money do you do that? Christina and I couldn't go to Disney World without like saving up for it, because it's like, hey, so it's $5,000 to walk through the door.
Oh
And
my
if
God.
you'd like a hamburger, we'll give you one, but you must take out a second mortgage on your house and bequeath at least some heirloom of $200 or more
Exactly.
to the Walt Disney Corporation. And then we will give you a hamburger, but no drink. So
And a bad hamburger.
Okay. If my dad didn't work for Disney, we would never go. We get in for free.
Okay.
Alan, I can get you in for free.
I'm sorry, what?
I can get you in for free.
This is recorded.
Christina!
This is recorded.
Christina, oh, she's not here. Dang it. I'm texting her right now. Christina,
That's
holy crap.
awesome.
You've changed. It's like I've shifted dimensions.
Wow.
That alone is like having a second job. Just being able to go to Disney World one time for free. Holy crap. I just got a $10,000 raise, guys.
Yay!
Holy crap.
That's awesome.
We'll talk more about it later.
So, yeah, we were just talking about love triangles and YA and whether, yeah,
Alan, perfect time for you to cut it.
I know.
Before we
Oh.
get there.
I can't read that.
It says, Christina, all caps, Christina, Jessie can get us into Disney World for free.
You just made Alan's day.
So funny.
Oh,
That is
yeah.
exciting.
I mean,
I can't wait to see the pictures of that.
Oh, please, yes. But I was
Come on, come on,
Sponsored by Jessie
come
May
on,
Books.
anytime. All right. Yeah, right. I know.
Sorry, what were y'all talking about before I was like, "Ah!"
We were talking
No.
about love triangles and YA because I have a theory.
All right, well.
No, because I have no, because I have a theory that when love triangles are done well, people don't notice it. Because there's a love triangle in Guns of the Dawn, and nobody thinks about it. Nobody notices it because it's done so well, and it's not. And I think Jessie kind of pointed out, I think why that works is because it's not overly taking over the plot. but it's kind of part of the broader themes of the story. Like you're still getting the zoomed out perspective on war and propaganda and yeah.
For me, that one works because it's super easy to know who to root for. Not Justin is the answer. I'm like, what are you even doing? Like, do you even know who Northway is? Like, move it aside, Justin. Like, you need to stop. You have met your match, bro.
Yeah.
See this. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I agree. It is not. I never even thought of that. Like, I literally just forgot there was a love triangle in that because
Yeah.
Same. Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Um,
it's subtle, right? It is subtle, and it's not taking the bigger part of the story, and it's not the main thread. I think that with young adult, mainly, we do have more stories that revolve around the first love, being not really clear about what are your taste, and being maybe more enthralled about new people every now and then. And I can see how that can lean towards a love triangle more often with young adult, that it's usually more leaned towards that audience that is still kind of like exploring those feelings. But it also comes with the expectations. I know there are books that have love triangles, and if I found that book because of that, I can enjoy that. But if I'm not looking for a book because of that point, I'm having a lot of trouble. And I don't think adult fantasy has that trope as big, or just explaining that angst as much as you can have that in young adult. Like you can say that in a Stormlight you have kind of like a love triangle, and it's very light, and it is subtle. I don't think necessarily that it has a love triangle. The same with Guns of the Dawn, because it was like, clearly you're gonna end up with this guy. I don't see the other way around, but I think it's different with young adult because of trying to explore those feelings. I don't know.
Yeah.
That
No, I think you said it. I
mean,
think.
I mean, especially if you are marketing toward the younger crowd, like this is. I mean, I'm around teenagers all day, and if they read, and it doesn't matter if they read, it's in their shows too. That's all they talk about. All they talk about is who they ship and who is the hot one,
Yes.
and which people are together. Like that. That is the most. That's the most interesting thing for them right now. Yesterday, I got into it about something because we were on our homecoming float and they were playing a whole bunch of Taylor Swift, and I was commenting on her lyrics, and I'm like, look, Taylor, you don't get to decide who he belongs with. Like, that's not your choice. Like, he has agency on who he belongs with, no matter what you say. And they're like, how dare you? And I'm like, what are y'all talking about? Like, Taylor, like, her thing is having been with a whole bunch of different boyfriends. Why are y'all looking to her for relationship advice? Like,
Yeah.
well, she was with Joe for like 6 years. Is she still with Joe? No. But that's what consumes their brains. And these are otherwise, and it's not just the dumb ones. These are brilliant children.
But it makes sense.
Yeah.
But to me, it makes sense. I can look back to when I was a teenager and I was very confused. I did not know myself or who I like or what are the traits that I liked. And I remember feeling, confused, and seeing that with movies and with the characters that you're reading. I think that it allows you to reflect on that a little bit. And it obviously has this drama element that I think it's really relatable to them. And so I can see how they find it really interesting. I remember doing that, and I think it's legit. But for us, maybe
I was the same way as a teenager. I would have been a teenager that Alan hates. I think.
Yeah, as well.
Were you
that.
lazy and didn't do any of your work and didn't show up for class all the time, and then
No.
complained to me about how your grade was bad?
No.
Yeah.
I did a lot of leaning.
I mean,
totally...
kids are fine. It's kids that don't do anything and then complain to me and then get their parents to complain.
No. I wouldn't have done that. My parents wouldn't have listened to that.
You're fine. Because the thing is, otherwise, I'd just be like, "Oh, you failed." But see, you've done some work.
I did have some teachers like you who gave me a good kick in the butt, and I needed it. And they ended up becoming my best friends. Like I ended up becoming their favorite student later, because I did listen and I needed that.
The second a kid tries to bypass talking to me themselves and by just telling their parent, we're done. Like, we're done.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
That's
are you
wonderful.
kidding? Like, I don't want to talk to your parent, because your parent,
Mhm.
I promise you, is not in possession of the facts. I promise you this.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so true.
So I have a question though, Issa. So you were talking about that because I relate too. I mean, I definitely feel like I had the angsty relationship stuff going on when I was younger. But do you think like in YA books, do you think that that gets explored, or even in any book, do you feel like that gets a little more explored through the female perspective of that angst versus the male perspective? Do we get any of that from the male perspective?
I guess there are some points in some books that get that point explored, but I definitely don't see them being the most popular books. Usually with young adult, I believe we have these female points of view that are exploring life, and I think this wave came because in more traditional fantasy we were used to have also female, but I think that females were kind of like a companion sometimes to the male point of view. So it came this wave, and I don't believe that even with books that have a multiple point of view of that male, we get those feelings explored. I usually, and especially with young adult, I think males in love triangles are just basically angsting about how amazing a woman is, and it's phenomenal. So no, I don't think necessarily we get that explored. That for the books that I've read,
Yeah,
which
no, same
obviously
here.
is a small percentage of the book.
There's one that comes to my mind, and I loved it. It's one that came out years ago called, well, I loved it, and then there's one thing I didn't love about it, but it was a contemporary book. It wasn't a fantasy book though. It was called Frankly in Love. Y'all remember
Yeah.
that? When that came out? And I loved it because it explored a Korean boy, second generation or first generation. Like his parents were from Korea, moved to the US, so they were very Korean, but he was Korean American. So it
Yeah.
was that, intersectionality of like, I'm not Korean enough, but I'm not American enough. And I'm going to fake date a Korean girl just to please
Okay.
my parents who want me to be with a Korean girl, but I'm really in love with this American girl and I'm going to date her in secret. So it was a secret dating trope, but it was so good.
Mm.
I thought it was really good. Like I said, there's one criticism I have of it, but it was so funny too. And it was sad too. But I thought that angsty stuff, but it was also exploring, like I said, the intersectionality thing. But
Mm.
yeah, I don't know. I'm really curious about this topic. So I'm just getting thoughts
I love
on that.
good love triangles. I kind of like the angst if that's what I'm seeking, but I don't like it if it's done for the purpose of being done. If you have miscommunication and if you have things that are just not adding value to the development of the characters, either emotionally or physically, like what they are doing, no.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of love triangle, no. If it plays a role moving the story forward, then maybe yes.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. I'm 100% with you
Yay.
on that. I think that's when it's done the best. Yeah. Jesse, any thoughts on that? Like,
I
any
was
thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think what you mentioned about YA kind of having like the love triangle, I think it's not just the love triangle. I think it's just romance in general being such a key focus. I think is very much like and when I speak, I'm speaking in broad terms. There's always going to be exceptions. So I'm sure someone will be like, well, what about this adult and this YA book that are the exception? So when I go to YA, I always expect a romance. That's kind of something that's very much a characteristic of the age range of a young adult book. Because of, Isa, what you were saying, it's just such a big thing in your life as a teenager. It's like all you're thinking about is like, wow.
Yeah.
So I think that that's something that is just inherently more present in young adult versus adult. Now, it's not to say that adult doesn't have a ton of romantic subplots that are very well developed. There's tons of examples of this, but I think that that's something that a lot of people, when they don't read YA, it's because they don't want to read all about the romance, which is totally fair. And I think that the other thing is it's very much like Isa, you mentioned coming of age type stories. So it's people figuring out who they are. It's friendships developing, it's romances developing for the first
Yeah.
time. And this isn't to say that that's not sometimes in adult literature. Like I think of Assassin's Apprentice as a great example of a coming of age story in the adult space, but there's something unique about YA that's what I always go to YA for. And I think when people read young adult, there's definitely books that you can tell are very much for the target age range.
Yeah.
And it's hard for an adult maybe to connect to that young adult story. But there are some that are special that kind of transcend the age range and are accessible to any and everyone. And I think a great example of this is, Alan, one that you really like is the Fireborn
Yes.
trilogy.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think that that's a great example of a young adult series that adults can appreciate just as much. And it has a lot of those same kind of tropes. Like it has a romantic subplot, it has a lot of coming of age type themes, but it has greater themes
Yeah.
explored in it as well, and it's just developed extremely well. So I think that there are some series that kind of it can be appreciated by everyone.
Well, the love triangle in that is handled differently anyway. It's another one of these. Well, first of all, I completely agree with you. Like that, like people who read a YA, like a young adult novel, and are pissed that there's a love triangle, like, or a romance, like no, like you deserve to be mad. Like, why did you read this and not think that this is what you're getting into? Like, that's awful. You know, like I read Ember in the Ashes, and I'm not irritated about the romance in that. Like, of course I knew that was going to be there. Whatever. Fireborn has that, but I think it's also handled really differently than the things mostly are. First of all, the two girls like each other, and that's never.
It's true. It's true. It's true.
Yeah, like they're not actually competing. They just both like him, and their end goal is not to get this guy. Their end goal is to continue to be better at dragon riding and fight this political battle they're fighting, while also both liking this guy. And that's the thing. Like they have actual goals in their life. That's why I like. That's why I like Annie and bless her heart. What's her name? Cass. What's the other girl's name?
I don't know.
I know what you're talking about. But I don't remember.
But they're such good characters because they're friends. They're really good friends. We just happen to like the same guy. Like, and the thing is, all of us, many of us have probably experienced that where two friends end up liking the same girl, and you're not going to not be friends over it. You just carry on with your life, and maybe maybe you shoot your shot if you can, and if not, then oh well, whatever. I guess we just both like this girl. Oh well, you know what? She's dating you. Cool. Guess what? We're still friends. Let's hang out.
Yeah. That's when it's done really well, in my opinion. I like that approach too.
And that's a very interesting point, because not so long ago I saw an interview that was done for the main characters of Grey's Anatomy, which shaped a generation of people, and it's now again being very popular for younger audiences. And the main character, she said that one of the main things that the series it's actually saying is that she kind of made popular the theme of pick me, pick me. And that's one of the most popular scenes of all of these seasons. And I think it's that feeling that it's also transported to all of these young adult books, the pick me feeling. And in Fireborn, it's not that kind of vibe. You never see that pick me. It I am better because this and that. They're very different people. They have their motivations, and the backstories are also different, and they never go to that space. So I think that's a very interesting point, how it was managed very differently. But I acknowledge.
What a good series.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a really interesting insight, Isa. It makes me think about, I don't know, it just makes me think about femininity. I can't say the word either, Jessie. The feminine perspective. And I'm also going back in my mind to what you were saying earlier about older fantasy and how women were just more side characters. Even in Lord of the Rings, as much as I loved Galadriel, for example, and Arwen, they were not big figures in that story. They had more page time in the Erwin has more page time in the appendices than she does in the actual books. But it's more like she was chosen by Aragon, you know? It's like more the chosen one for the female is being chosen by the male,
Yeah.
whereas being a chosen one as a male character is being the chosen one because of duty and because of this hierarchy of magic or something.
That's a good
Yeah.
point.
And I'm sure you see different. I'm not saying that's all that YA fantasy does or all that stories do. We do see variations in that,
Yeah.
but I just think in general trends that we're not even conscious of, that maybe there could be some bleed over from that. And I don't know. That's really interesting. I'm just really fascinated by this topic because I do think, and this is going to be part of a larger discussion I want to have at some point. I do feel like a lot of coming of age stories, when it's a male character, most of the time it's going to be an adult fantasy. If it's a
Yeah.
female character, most of the time it's going to be a YA fantasy. And I think part of that I have so many reasons why I think that's the case, actually, that are brewing in my head. But yeah,
Mhm.
I'm really curious about that. And you all make me want to pick up Fireborn, by the way.
Please
it's-
do.
And the thing is, like, for everyone who says I hate women, like, everyone's sitting there, everyone is sitting there knocking on freaking Annie and being like, oh no, Team Lee. I'm like, no, Annie.
Team Annie.
Annie is where it is at. Like, Lee, you need to get over whatever your freaking problem is and join the right side. Like, do it. I'm like,
Oh my
Annie, get him. And you know, everyone hates her because, like, whatever. Like, Annie,
Yeah.
you know what side's the right side, Annie. You got it. So
Yes.
I mean, that's after the
Yeah.
second book. Second book, I'm just like, y'all don't
No.
understand who the real good guy is. Like, the real good guy is Atreus, but
No.
no one agrees with me. They're wrong. They're wrong. I'm the only one that sees that. But
Mhm.
it's so good. Like, it's so good. And the pick me thing, Issa. These teenagers, I have never, like, it's gotten so much worse in the last 10 years since I've been teaching. Their desire to individuate and be special in some way. Like, they cannot accept, hey, I'm just going through life liking a bunch of stuff other people like, and I'm
Yeah.
mid, because most teenagers are mid. Sorry guys, you're mid. Most adults are mid. But they want to be like, they have to reach this like pinnacle of being the most special person that there is. And the thing is, you know what? I just made a video talking about how, like, I struggle with not being the best at anything. Like, so I'm like, no one is immune to this, and that makes me mad because now I'm like teenagers. But so this pick me thing, this, like, they are chosen among anybody else in the world, and it makes them feel special. And that's why a lot of them like read that stuff, because, like, oh, they're not like the other person, they're not like whatever. We got pick me teachers, y'all. I got teachers in my school that are not like other teachers. Like,
No.
it's everyone's lonely in this
Yeah.
culture. We have a very lonely culture, and I think that might be contributing to this, you know, this I don't know, resurgence or I don't know, reign of that same thing over and over, where there is one person who is wanted by all of these other people, and
Yeah.
we just I mean, look at every reality show. It's literally like 90% of the reality shows are like, hey, this one dude / girl is going to pick you above all of these other people.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about it that way.
It's just everywhere, and I mean, I don't like it. And what you said, Joanna, like, I don't like coming of age stories in general. Part of that is because I'm older, and so watching some kid learn how to not be a moron is not the most appealing thing. And I don't think, like, that's right that most, like, the girl ones would be categorized YA. I mean,
I could be wrong about that. But
I
just
mean,
the
my
ones
first thought is just
that come to my
because
head.
it's gonna contain a whole bunch of romance, and more than young adult, more than the category of young adult and adult, it's really romance, not romance. Like,
Yeah.
that's my first thought. The other part is, like, the whole, you know, we don't take women seriously in fantasy and all that stuff. But that would be my first thought. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, my other theory behind this, again, I need to develop my thoughts on this a bit more, but my other theory behind this is that in our societies, like in history, I think that the way that we would see a boy become a man is go to war, the draft, go to the military. And so like there's a really violent, abrupt coming of age passage for rite of passage for a male than there is for a female, or it's not explored. It just hasn't been explored enough, in my opinion, the
Mm.
female side of that. But because there's so much more violence involved, I think, for the males in our like, and that's me reaching. I don't have research about that, but
Mm.
that's just my assumption, especially because in fantasy, a lot of times when you do watch a coming of age arc for a male character, it's usually because they become a murderer of some sort.
Well, that's why Guns of the Dawn is so good. Like,
Yeah, that's a good point.
exploring that from, you know, a very specifically female point of view, a privileged female, not a
Privileged
poor
female.
female.
Yeah.
Like, she did not have to go. She chose to go. She has way more agency than the chosen one. Like, she picked to do her duty rather than send her poorer, you know, house servant.
Yeah.
Which automatically, like, Emily Marshwick is BA. Like, she's awesome.
Goosebumps. Yeah.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a brilliant book. I
Yeah.
need to read more from Tchaikovsky, honestly.
Yeah.
I just need to read more from that author.
I think, Joanna, for the arc of growing up and young adult and women and all of that, I think that adult fantasy kind of like fits everything, but young adult has a very specific range of themes that cover right now. So I think that if you have a book that covers those topics that this genre has, then it goes automatically there, you know, or that the audience will resonate more with that. So it will be marketed towards that audience. Meanwhile, adult fantasy, it's kind of like for everyone and everything. But, you know, it's not as marketed, I guess.
That's such a good point, because my nephew, he's 13, 14, he's in 8th grade. And he read Redwall, and then he read like the Forgotten Realms Dritz books, all the ones I had. And he keeps asking me for books. Well, the problem is I don't have any books for his age now. I have books that I just need him to be slightly older. Like, I don't, you know, like, I'm not gonna, you can't read this, Scotty. But anything else he's already read when he was young. Like young boys have Redwall, Harry Potter, Percy Jackson.
Aragon.
Yeah, but what
That's
did you
true.
read? What did you read when you were younger? Like, what did we all read?
Yeah, I mean that's true. I mean, I read Forgotten Realms books and then translated into transitioned into more adult fantasy. But there's not a lot of young adult that isn't Harry Potter, Aragon, because freaking Percy Jackson ain't no young adult. I tried to read the first one. That is middle grade.
Middle grade.
Yeah. There's not a ton of young adult fantasy geared towards like boys.
Even Harry Potter, I would say, is more middle grade. At least it starts that way. It might age up a bit as it goes on.
I was going to bring that up and just say that that's really interesting. And I think young adult is kind of a new age range. I think it's pretty recent. It like the last 20 years, I think it's really become a thing. And before that, I would say like prior to Harry Potter, it was pretty much non-existent. Like there were, of course, young adult stories out there, like Wizards of Earthsea, Redwall, these types of stories. They were out there, but there wasn't a young adult section of your bookstore.
No.
And now it's just so different. And it's curious that middle grade has a ton of these stories for young boys, but they go from middle grade and they're expected to jump up to adult. Whereas it's so interesting that young girls have this whole bookstore section pretty much with stories primarily like representing them. And like there's of course exceptions, of course. Like Scythe is a great exception. There's the Knife of Never Letting Go, Chaos Walking series. That's a great trilogy. There's other ones, Aragon, but it's just an interesting thing that it's very unique to young adult that it's so dominated by the female perspective. And it's just a curiosity, like why I don't know.
I want to know.
It's really interesting.
I'm so fascinated by that, Jessie. I know that when I was younger, there really wasn't a YA fantasy section. And Well, I used to read YA, I guess, like horror, paranormal. There was a little bit of that. This was pre-Twilight, by
I
the
know.
way. But yeah, and nowadays it's so different. And I know that even as an adult reader before our booktube, I was reading a lot of YA fantasy. And part of that female perspectives. And I just felt like I've been missing this my whole life. I know I love fantasy, but I just don't feel like I ever got enough female perspectives in fantasy. And
Yeah.
so I was really grateful for that. And I'm really grateful that it exists now, but
Mhm.
I don't really feel comfortable with the fact that we do see such a dichotomy of like YA female
Yeah.
female fantasy more or is more marketed towards female fantasy, even though I think it's great and anybody can appreciate YA at any age, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nobody should feel ashamed of even enjoying middle grade or younger.
Agreed.
But it does kind of make me feel weird about YA being marketed towards females and adult fantasy still being, I think, highly marketed towards males. I still think that's the case.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's changing a little bit. I've noticed a ton of adult fantasy coming out. And what I think is another really interesting thing that I've started noticing and is something that I would love to hear more thoughts about is a lot of the adult fantasy that's coming out that is from the female perspective has actually been reading a little bit younger to me.
Mhm.
It's very like the Daughter of the Moon Goddess
Mhm.
is a really good example. That's adult
Mhm.
fantasy, and I just don't think I don't think it's adult. I don't.
I
It
don't think so
reads
either.
younger than a young adult
It
book
links.
to me.
They throw
Um,
glitter magic, Alan, in that book. She throws glitter.
Oh, you'll never clean that up. You'll never get that off the floor. So,
It's magic.
like, if anybody's heard me like mock the blurbs that Orbit's publicists push out on their new books, a ton of the fantasy books that coming out, the adult fantasy books that have women main characters marketed towards women are still hyping the romance angle. Like
Yeah,
like the Honey
that's
Witch
true.
is one of the most like stop. And I guarantee you, if the book came from TikTok, if the author is famous from Book Talk, then I guarantee you it's marketed towards females and romance is one of the main angles. Every
Yeah.
single time. I read all of them. I'm subscribed, like I follow them on my Insta like an old man. And every time they say we just acquired this, I look at it and I'm like I went on like if you want me to read more female authors, you've got to have them write about stuff that I care about. Like I
Yeah.
don't care about romance. Like I don't care that oh well he was mad or she was mad and oh well he's just gonna soften. Like I don't care. Like I don't care. Like I don't care. Like
Alan, do you care?
no, I don't care. I like and now every now and then there's a really good one and I'm like yes and I immediately add it to my Goodreads like want to read, but it's so rare and it makes me sad.
And I think that's why romantasy is like this brand new word. I feel like this is like this year, the romantasy word has become a thing. But I think that it just needs its own genre because it's
Yeah.
become such a phenomenon now with TikTok
Yeah.
that it's making it harder for people like us who are looking for fantasy that's not dominated by romance to find the books that we are going to love. And
Yeah.
I think that it's all about expectations. Like if you're going to read an adult fantasy, you're not expecting a romance to kind of take over the story because it hasn't in the past. That was more of a young adult type trope to play with. Of course, there are exceptions always, but that's something that I think it just has to have its own section now because
Yeah.
it's become such a popular genre. It's a
Yeah.
totally separate genre with totally separate tropes and themes and
Yeah.
marketing, everything. It just needs to have its own thing.
Yeah,
Nadia,
and
no, they're not reading romance.
No.
Not one. In 10 years, I have never seen one of my teenage boys reading a romance ever. They
but
don't care.
I just want to highlight channel Books with Banks, Alex's channel. You were on his channel recently, Alan. Do you remember?
I know it.
And
Yeah, no, I know
he
it.
reads a
I was
lot of
young.
romance, and he loves ACOTAR. He's
Yeah.
interesting because he loves a lot of adult fantasy. Like he's a big Malazan fan, but he also loves ACOTAR, and he loves
That's
Diana. what is
Not
the
good.
Outlander series. He
Yes.
loves that series. And I have just been applauding him. I'm like, that is so awesome that you're an adult male who is open about loving romance. He's trying to
Yeah.
like remove that stigma. And I think that that's
Agree.
a cool thing.
Mhm.
I don't think there's anything wrong with loving
someone liking it.
romantasy.
Yeah,
What?
there's nothing wrong with someone liking it.
Yeah,
It's just
there's
like,
nothing wrong with it.
I do not like it. Like I don't.
No,
If
there's
you make
nothing
me
wrong with
a
not
husband,
liking it too.
I don't
Yeah.
care.
No,
Yeah.
yeah. But I can see how if the booktubers that people see are usually, or the main male booktubers that people see are sharing that opinion, other male viewers can think that that's what is to be expected, right? Like how they can project that because that's what the authority is doing, then that's what they should be feeling. So I think it's great. And I definitely see it as stigma there. Same as if you, but it's not just with romance. I think that overall, there are books that if you don't like, then you are not a real fantasy reader or you don't really like the genre. So, there are different stigmas out there related with what you should do and what you should like. But yeah, I mean, 100% you can have your opinion. And I think sharing that, it's 100% what we are here. But I see how people can,
Get that. I get that. Like I think Fireborn and Long
Yes.
Quest Quartet and Guns of the Dawn are poorer without the romance. I think they
Yeah.
are made richer by the fact that romance is there. It's
Yeah.
just I am never going to pick up a book
Yeah,
that
yeah, no, fair.
focuses on the back saying like, "Hey, will they or won't they?" No.
Yeah,
like,
no, I know.
do I care if Ross and Rachel got together? No. Like I no. Ross, you're awful. Rachel, you're vapid. Like no, I don't care. I would love to see if Chandler and Monica ever get to adopt these babies though. Like I don't care. Like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
never gonna tune in because of that. I want to see how many sandwiches Joey can eat. Let's do it.
Yeah.
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 I can see.
Well, you all, I am so sorry to have to cut off the conversation here, but I know that Jessie needs to eat some lunch, and Issa, I know it's getting a bit late over there as well. And I gotta get my house clean, honestly, for some guests that are coming over later. But this has been such a fun conversation. I love this topic, by the way. So if anybody wants to continue the conversation, I'd be happy to do so, either in a future video or just in discussions. Or
Yeah.
please feel free to comment under the video in the comment section too, if you watch the replay and you have any thoughts on this topic, because it's one I think that's worth just continuing to explore. Removing stigmas, I think, is an important part of what we can do here on BookTube, or just opening this conversation. So anyway, this has been so much fun though. I had the best time talking with you all. So I just want to thank my guests again. Thank you so much, Jessie, for joining us today.
Thank you
Why
so much
read?
for having me. This was awesome.
Yay. And thank you so much, Issa from Fun Fantasy Books. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you again. Like, I am so happy to be here, really.
Yay. And thank you, Alan, for popping in. And just to make sure
You're
people
saying that to be
know,
nice.
Alan was invited. So he's always invited. Yeah.
Saying that to be nice.
But this was a lot of fun. And I'll go ahead and leave the links to all the channels in the description below. So please make sure that you're subscribed to these channels if you're not already, for some crazy reason, because they put out amazing content, especially if you're into the spooky season or fall season vibes. They have some wonderful recommendations. So check them out. And thank you all so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.